This is the Evolpow P3A tank power rack. I really wanted to love this power rack, but it just has too many things that need tweaking, but it does have potential. So hit like and subscribe, and let's see if we can't give Evolpow some suggestions to help them get their rack back on track and ready for your home gym. You might not be familiar with Evolpow, and honestly, neither was I when they reached out to me to do this review. The company is focused on creating home gym equipment with a small footprint at an affordable price, which is admirable, and it's part of why I would love to see them make changes to this rack so that I can give it my full seal of approval. So let's start out by talking about some of the things that I liked first. The assembly process was fairly straightforward, and once it was put together, the unit looks good. Black is my favorite color, and as you can see, this power rack is aesthetically very pleasing. I like that it comes with plate storage on the sides and not on the back. And I like that it includes band pegs on each side at the bottom. Even though I don't use a lot of band resistance in my current training, it is something that's useful to have at certain points in a training cycle. Although the rack itself is short, I like that the multi-grip pull-up attachment is about 2 inches higher than the cross members, so you can get full range of motion for any pull-up, chin-up movement, and there's plenty of clearance if you want to do hangs for spinal health. Although it has a small footprint, the rack doesn't feel too tiny, so when I step inside it, I don't feel claustrophobic like I have on similar racks that I've reviewed at this price point in the past. These safety bars are solid. They are actually one of the heaviest components of this rack, and they might be the heaviest safety bars I've ever used, and that says I started lifting weights in 1993. The P3A comes with a decent number of attachments, and because of the 40.2 inches in width of the inside of the rack and the 52.4 inches of depth from front to back, I'm able to squat inside the rack instead of being forced to squat outside of it, which means I don't have to worry about the foot plate being in the way of my feet when I squat. This rack has a 365-day limited warranty against damage and a 30-day return policy. Customers are also going to love the $799 price point for the rack, especially because that includes shipping within the continental United States. So these are all outstanding starting points. Now let's talk about the areas where I feel the company has opportunities to improve. Okay, so the first area where there is potential for improvement is in shipping. This unit was shipped to us in 3 separate boxes, which a lot of carriers do because that helps them to save on their shipping costs, whether they offer free shipping to the customer or not. It makes it cheaper for them to ship out. Unfortunately, what that ends up doing sometimes is it leaves the boxes exposed to damage, and all 3 of the boxes showed up at our house with severe damage from the carrier. What I'd like to see Evolpow do is ship their boxes on a pallet like some of the bigger brands do, because then that will help to make the boxes a little bit more secure and damage resistant, and you won't have to worry about whether there are potentially parts missing like my wife and I did when we first saw these boxes with all this damage sitting in front of our garage door. Now, let's move to the next area where they could potentially improve, and that is the weight storage posts. I mentioned that I like the fact that the weight storage posts are on the side and not on the back, because if the weights were stored on the back, then every time you rack the weight, you'd have the potential for the plates to just fly right off of the back, which has happened to me before with other units from other brands. But these storage posts are on the side, and that's a good thing. Unfortunately, the storage posts are not, and I used my impact to tighten all of these down, but still over time, you can see that this one came loose, and as a result, you can see that the plates want to slide off. So 2 things I would like for them to do is improve the bolts that secure the storage posts to the posts of the rack, and then also I'd like to see them increase the diameter of the weight post just slightly so that it's harder for the plates to slide on and off. That may seem like it's going to be inconvenient for the people who are using it, but I'm not saying make it impossible to take off, just increase the friction so that the plates are less likely to slide on and off while you're using the rack like these will. Also, this power rack is set up for people who use bumper plate storage. Well, the fact is that not every home gym owner uses bumper plates, and although I think the concept of this rack is a good concept for someone who is setting up a home gym for the first time, you have to remember as a brand that not every first-time home gym owner is a novice lifter. There are people who have been lifting for years in a public gym, and then they decide to take the plunge and become home gym owners, and those people are going to need a lot of weight. Honestly, if I didn't have as many plate trees as I have, including a vertical plate tree, there's no way we would be able to store all of our weights on this rack, and we'd end up having our weights just leaning up against the wall. And so if you want to make something that is as user-friendly for as many home gym owners as possible, I would love to see the option for weight storage horns that go up all the way up to right about here for people who use metal plates that are of different sizes like I do. And that's an easy option that you can put in the ordering process and let people decide if they want plate storage for bumper plates or for metal plates. And that would make it a lot more user-friendly for as many people as possible across the home gym community. Since we're standing over here, let's talk about the safety bars, because this is another area where I think there's room for improvement. So I mentioned these safety bars are extremely sturdy, and yes, they are. These things are nice and heavy. But these safety bars are secured by a spring collar, and that is not good. First of all, spring collars lose tension over time. So instead of having this secured with a spring collar, what I'd like to see them do is have a hole drilled through the back of each one of the safety bars, and then insert a cotter pin so that when the bar goes that way, as you are racking the weight on it, the cotter pin will stop it instead of this spring collar, which, as I said, is going to lose tension over time. The other thing that needs improvement, you guys can see right here that where this cable terminates is honestly not very secure. I don't like that there's all of this extra cable here, but that's an aesthetic thing. What's of more importance to me is that because this cable termination point is right here, it's got the cable running up and down the back side of the front posts. So let's say you want to put your J-hook here so you can do overhead presses outside the rack, and I'll tell you why that's important a little bit later on. But let's say you want to do that. Look at how the cable is getting in the way of the J-hook. This is not good. Instead, what I'd like to see is for them to have this termination point right here be on the outside right here attached to this same trolley system. Just attach it right here instead of right here. Then the cable path is going to go along the outside of the rack. It's not going to get in the way of the landmine attachment, but it's also not going to be in the way of the J-hooks. So now you would be able to lift both inside and outside the rack without a problem. As it stands right now, you can't really do that without having issues. And if you're somebody who likes to squat facing your mirror like I do, well, you see the problem there, don't you? And while we're over here talking about this, look at the quality of the welds. Now, if you've never done any welding before, and I can't say I'm a welding expert, but I'm just telling you that this does not look good. This looks like somebody who doesn't know how to weld welded these. And when I showed this close up to some people I know who are experienced welders, they were amazed that this thing even was allowed off of the assembly line and into mass production. So that's definitely an area where this needs to be improved. The landmine. So this landmine is actually very smooth. I love how it operates. What I don't like is how it stores. So ideally for me, there would be a bracket right here that would hold the landmine holder in place when you're not using it. So you just bring it up and click it right into position, and then it wouldn't be in the way. I don't even think that it would really be in the way of anyone who's doing any work down here, although I guess that could be a concern. But what I know is I don't like the fact that it's either right there, which is in the way if I'm walking, or it's right there, which is in the way as I'm walking back and forth trying to load plates onto the barbell. And it definitely doesn't need to be out here in the middle of the aisle as we walk through, because again, now it becomes a trip hazard. So all of the different ways that it could sit are tripping hazards, and that's not good in a situation where people are going to be potentially walking around with heavy weights in their hands. So as a safety issue, I would prefer to see some way to secure this landmine attachment to the power rack post when it's not in use. Let's talk about why I think this rack needs to be a little bit taller, which relates to what I said about lifting outside of the rack instead of inside the rack. So if you are doing any kind of overhead work inside the rack, and you want to use your safety bars, which is why you'd want to do it inside the rack, you're not going to have enough clearance. Now, I'm only 5'9", but that's to the top of my head. When I lift my hands in the air, that's obviously going to be a lot taller. So as you guys can see right here, any bar I have in my hands is going to run into the bottom of these cross members. Companies that are just getting to the home gym space tend to make racks shorter because they think all of us have low ceilings. Well, I don't have low ceilings, and a lot of people who have their gyms in garages don't have low ceilings. We also have our gyms in barns and other things like that, and we would like the extra clearance. All this does is create a cottage industry for manufacturers and fabricators who are then called upon to raise the cross member so that people can actually make full use of their rack and for things like pull downs and things like that without having to sit on the floor. They don't have to bend their legs to do pull-ups and things like that. What I would like to see them do is have a taller option so that maybe you can have this be maybe 90 inches high, and then that way that gives you a little bit more clearance. Another way to look at it is just make the cross members the same height as the pull-up bar, and then you won't have any issues at all. Since I'm standing right here, I don't like this. So you guys can see that this pull down handle is perched right here on top of these hooks that are supposed to use to store the attachments. That's not good, okay? Because this isn't stored securely. It will be very easy if I'm racking a squat for this to pop up out of here and fall down. I'm not interested if my head is this way as I'm racking the squat, this potentially coming down and hitting me in the head. That would not be good. Instead, I want to see a hook right there. Another reason why this matters is because there's no hook right here. You have to pick a side. And so when you store it on this hook like this, assuming you can actually get it on there, then when you're using the cable, this pull down attachment is interfering with the cable path. And it is the same thing if you store it on the other side. So if you put it on this hook over here, you're gonna have the same problem. Once again, assuming you can get it on there. Again, see, it's interfering with the cable path. Again, that's not good. So I'd like to see Evolpow put one more hook. Just put one more hook right there so that this pull down attachment, which I love that they included, could hang right here, and then it won't be in the way at all. Option 2, just make these hooks a little bit wider so that this can actually sit down inside of there instead of being perched awkwardly up here like it is now. Now, as I'm moving back out of the rack, here's the other thing. I keep on bringing up the pull-up bars and all that. Well, I love the height, as I mentioned. What I don't love is that this surface is too slick. Again, this is typical of companies that are just now entering the home gym space, because what you see more in public gyms is people wearing gloves when they train. In home gyms, a lot of time people don't wear gloves, and these chin-up bars are way too slick. I would have to put chalk on them if I wanted to use them, because as soon as your hands get sweaty, you're gonna start having issues with slipping off of the pull-up bar. So I'd like for them to improve the surface texture of the pull-up bar. There are ways to rough it. There are other coatings you can use that will make it a little bit grippier without making it so abrasive on your hands that you cut your hands. Like, you don't need to knurl your pull-up bar, but it does need to be something that I'm not gonna slip and fall off if I'm doing multiple sets of pull-ups, or if it's part of something like a CrossFit WOD where you generate a lot of sweat. One more thing I like to point out that could be improved for the sake of the customer experience relates to the assembly process, and that is they need to number the parts and match those numbers to the numbers that are in the instruction manual. So you open up the instruction manual and it says put part 52 on part 75, and you don't see a 75 or 52 because none of the parts are numbered. So I think that if they took the extra time to actually put numbers on the parts, since that's how they're referring to them in the instruction manual anyway, that would be very good, and it will go a long way towards helping people, especially people who are not necessarily handy with tools. All right, the final area that I think needs to be addressed if they want to make this power rack outstanding is Evolpow needs to pay greater attention to quality control. I say that because of things like the J-hooks. The J-hooks fit fine on the rear posts of the power rack. As you guys can see, they go in and out no problem. But when you try to put them on the front posts, it's a little bit tougher. Because you guys can see right there, it's not really sliding well. It's so bad that you can even see that it's causing wear marks on the surface of the post. That's an area where you can have potential for rust, and it's not a good thing. In fact, it's even worse on this side. This side, when I want to put the J-hook on, I actually have to hit it so that it'll go on. And this is what it looks like when you're trying to take it off. Not ideal. Oh, wait. And that was a demonstration live of why I said the plate storage horns need to be fixed. And look, the J-hook is still not off. Okay, there we go. We get it off there. Now, can you imagine having to go through that every single time you're putting your J-hooks on or taking them off? That's not good at all. And so as a result, I'm saying they need to pay attention to quality control. Another area where you see quality control kind of slipped up is the holes in the front post are not 100% lined up with the holes in the rear post. So this front post and this rear post are lined up with each other, but when I take the safety bar out, you see that it's rubbing on the side. Okay, I'm not pulling that down. And in fact, if you look right here, if I just go straight in, see, it's kind of off center right here. I actually have to push it over physically in order to get it to slide through there. And we're still getting the rubbing on the side of this safety bar. Again, rubbing and friction, metal on metal, is not good because that's how you create rust. A thorough quality control inspector would have found these problems probably even faster than I did, and I identified the problem when we were putting the power rack together. All in all, those are the things that jumped out to me within the last month or so. Other improvements like changing to aluminum pulleys or changing to a more durable material for the J-hooks, which are already getting chewed up by my barbell after less than a month of use. These would be nice to haves, but they're not 100% essential. You know, I also have to commend Evolpow because I let them know when I was about halfway through my notes for my review that this was not going to be a positive review. Not that they could change my opinion, but I think it's nice to give a brand a heads up before you essentially trash their product in front of the world. To their credit, they said that they didn't want me to change a thing, and that as long as I was fair about talking about the good points of the product as well as the not so good ones, they were willing to use my feedback as constructive criticism rather than taking it as me just being negative. I've worked with brands in the past that were not so open-minded, and so I have got to give Evolpow credit. And after watching this video, they actually emailed me to let me know that they are already improving how the landmine is stored when not in use. They're looking at improving the storage hooks for the attachments, and they're going to improve the pull-up bar grip, as well as beefing up the quality control to address issues like the welds. This is all great news, and I think that there's tremendous potential for version 2 of this power rack to be an outstanding option for your home gym. The link to check out this power rack and all of the other Evolpow products is in the description for this video, so you can keep up with everything they have going on, as well as when improvements to this rack become available.